Welcome to today's Crosspoint Devotion. I hope you're having a great week, and today I want to give you some encouragement. Again, this encouragement comes from the Old Testament. We're going to go to 2 Kings chapter 4, and this is during the life and the ministry of Elisha. Now, many times we know a lot about the prophet Elijah. He seems to get a lot of publicity as we talk about prophets from the Old Testament. But Elisha was his successor, and actually Elisha did more miracles than Elijah did, even though Elijah did some amazing miracles. But here's what I want us to talk about today as we get to this story of Elisha. Elisha sometimes reminds us in his ministry that God cares about the little things in your life and the little things in my life. I'm afraid sometimes when we follow God, we think God is only interested in the big things that are going on in the world. For example, there's a major battle going on between Russia and Ukraine, and that's a major world issue that everybody's watching, and so we would naturally think God's got to be interested in that war between Russia and Ukraine simply because so many people's lives are at stake, and so naturally God's going to be interested in what's happening there. But is God really interested in my little situation here in the place where I live? And if we're not careful, we can sometimes fool ourselves into thinking that our God is only interested in the big things. Not just the big things that are going on in the world, but sometimes only the big things that happen in our own personal lives. And that's why I love this little place that we're going to talk about in 2 Kings chapter 4. In this particular location, there are a group of prophets who all know Elisha. In some regards, you might say that Elisha is the mentor, and this little group of prophets are his trainees who are trying to be trained for the work that God wants them to do. It's the same type of training that Elijah gave to Elisha. So these prophets are meeting together under the direction of Elisha, and it's time to eat. And so they send out a prophet from among the group to go out and collect some things that they can throw into a pot and make a pot of stew. What they don't realize is when the guy returns from collecting the various items in the area where they were and they cut them up and threw them into the pot, one of the items they threw into the pot was actually something that was poisonous. And once the stew was done and they began to be served, it wasn't very long before people realized, oh no, we have put something in the pot that's going to bring death. That's recorded for us in 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 41. They served some for the men to eat, but when they ate the stew, they cried out, "There's death in the pot, man of God," and they were unable to eat it. Thankfully, someone recognized pretty early on when they began to distribute the stew that there was something in that pot that no one needed to eat, because if they did, and it digested through their system, it might cause death. Now here's my point that I want to show you today. Elisha, the prophet of God, he did some pretty amazing things on a really big scale, but at the same time he was concerned that those men had the right supper to eat that night. And so it says in the next verse, then Elisha said, "Get some flour." He threw it into the pot and said, "Serve it for the people to eat," and there was nothing bad in the pot. Isn't it interesting that Elisha, who had been trained by the great prophet Elijah, he wasn't just interested in the big things that God wanted him to do, he was also interested in the small everyday details of life. And when those men who were his trainees, if you will, were sitting around a pot of stew and they were going to miss their supper or perhaps even die if they ate the wrong foods in the pot, he said, "Let me perform a miracle." And he threw some flour into the pot. And whatever happened next was a miracle of God, because that flour took away the poisonous effect, and every man was able to eat supper that night. That's a reminder to you and a reminder to me that God's interested in the everyday things that we're going through. He's interested in whether we can pay our bills. He's interested in whether we've got food to put on the table. He's interested in when we have a flat tire. The God that we serve, yes, He's interested in the massive things that are going on in the world, and His eye is on every one of those, but His eye is on you too. That's what Jesus talked about one time when He said, God knows even when one hair falls from our head, because He's intimately involved and knows your life and mine. So today, if you feel a little alone and you're going through some difficulties and you don't know if God cares, He does. He does. He cares. And He's going to be with you as you walk through those, as you trust and put your faith in Him, just like you did when you trusted Jesus. Well, I hope that'll encourage you, and I hope you'll see God help you and transform some things in the little parts of your life. Have a great day.